So Stephen, we've just wrapped up the 2022 New Zealand Economics Forum, a big day and of course unfolding against the drama and the backdrop of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But we touched on some huge topics, started the day with Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr, and then of course, hard act to follow, but then immediately the panel of experts on monetary policy. What was your take?
Well, what surprised me perhaps a little bit was the contrast between Adrian and the three panellists. Absolutely. They obviously seemed to have a pretty different view of the world. Adrian was very reassuring, which is great. The other three were more worried, and not just about the RBNZ, but more about the world economic situation and the challenges that central banks are going to have landing this inflationary plane on the aircraft carrier was the metaphor that was discussed. And there's a lot to be probably concerned about in a world that has almost forgotten what inflation is all about and is fast playing catch up in terms of the impacts of inflation, particularly on lower income people, but also more broadly. So that was a sobering discussion through the morning, and I think it's something that we're going to be talking about a lot, for over much of this year.
Yeah, monetary policy is certainly in the mainstream media. We went from that into fiscal policy, and again a really strong panel. Something that struck me in that, it's a theme over the last 2 days, is the trade-offs that the government is facing and the sheer complexity coming at the government, at policymakers, at regulators, really drives the need for rigorous analysis. I think Frank Scrimgeour said this morning, it's soft hearts with hard heads.
Yes.
We really need that, and a theme that had come through yesterday is bold ideas to be prepared for the shocks that are happening, but gosh, think them through. There are so many pieces of action in play here. That came through in fiscal, and then of course we came to the perennial Kiwi economic favourite of housing. Interesting topics, your view?
Well, I think a lot of the arguments we've heard before, and I think there's been progress made over the last sort of decade. I think one of the challenges we've got now is there still doesn't seem to be consensus at the moment as to what exactly is causing what's going on right now, and I think it's quite apparent that interest rates are a much bigger driver, or have been. Ultra-low interest rates have been a much bigger driver recently of house prices anyway. So it was a great discussion. We had some interesting ideas. It was interesting to see Dominic Stevens in his new role promoting capital gains taxes again. It'll be interesting to see whether gets anywhere with that, given where the current government has gone.
He's on the inside.
Now he's on the inside. But I think acknowledgement of progress being made, but significantly more to do. I wonder, though, whether, again, that's going to be slightly overshadowed with some of these other issues this year, and particularly if house prices start to soften the way it seems that certainly the macroeconomists, including the Reserve Bank Governor, see it as happening.
Mm. And then, of course, we finished with the panel on globalisation. I mean, if we thought that the discussion on monetary policy was sobering, I talked to the globalisation panel. Fascinating the connections drawn between obviously the dramatic events in Ukraine and wider Europe at the moment, and the connections of those through to China. We heard Rodney Jones call out February 4th as a date that might live on when the history books are written about the joint statements between China and Russia. So, I mean, it was a fascinating discussion. We're here in a small country that's, we ride the waves on this. We're not the influencer or the power player. What did you make of that?
Well, I thought the most sobering aspect was Rodney's comments, in what was already a sobering topic, was Rodney's comments about the risks around Taiwan. And I think he's right to bring them up. It's not something we'll discuss yet in the world. The focus will be rightly on Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. But it does seem that we're seeing a significant change in the world order currently, which led to a conversation about globalisation and how much it was in retreat, and how much the US-led, if you like, post-World War II system is fraying around the edges. And the reality is we've had what's currently the 10th or 12th largest, I think 12th largest economy is invading its neighbour, and the world seems powerless to do anything about it at this point. And there was a period in the 90s when we all thought that as economic growth occurred, there was that famous story about, if you had a McDonald's in both countries, they'd never invade each other. Well, I'm sorry, it's just happened, and so we are in suddenly very difficult times. The reassuring aspect of that was the consensus amongst the panellists that if the West rediscovers its mojo, by that was really referring to Gigi Foster's views about the sort of subsuming of economic policies in recent times. But when the West does grow again, there are certain things about globalisation that are going to reassert themselves, and so they really talked about a retreat of globalisation, not a complete abandonment of the model, which I think is importantly right for this country, because we survive on the global trading system. Yeah. Nobody owes us a living. It's not like we've got Mother England sitting over there like we did prior to the 70s. So we do need the system to work, and all the small countries of the world need the system to work. So that was positive, but yeah, very, very sobering backdrop, and we're in the middle of an upheaval of the world of the world geopolitics at this point.
It's massive, and again, I see the overlay here between the economic forces, the political forces, and some of the sociological forces. Those senses of national identity. People have been talking about culture wars within country, but I think we're looking at some of the culture wars that maybe people thought we had put behind us around liberal democracies versus autocratic states. I think you're right. We could be looking at, watching it unfold on our TV screens, a real shift in the global order.
Tim Grosser was very interesting on that subject too. I mean, he raised the issue as to whether Putin is completely miscalculated, and really signalling the economic impacts on Russia's population of this invasion could be a significant a problem for Vladimir Putin. Now, we don't know how that's going to play out. Tim made the point. Actually, neither does he. But it is, we're seeing history being made in front of our eyes, and the challenge, as you said, for a country like New Zealand is how do you navigate your way through that and achieve the best outcomes for your people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, we started the New Zealand Economic Forum series for rigorous analysis, vigorous debate. We've had a lot of that over the last couple of days. What are you most looking forward to when, it's a hard question, 2023, who would have been able to predict today, last year, but 2023 when we meet again, what's on your watch list?
Well, I remember how much things have moved on since we started planning this thing 4 or 5 months ago, and as to where we've ended up, and think, that's a tough question. But I think I'm excited about the fact that hopefully next year it'll be in person.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we'll still do it online as well, because I think we can attract an audience online and a discussion online, which is different to the one in person. But Jim Bolger made the point yesterday, there's a big part of these conferences is the conversations that happen around the conferences. And unfortunately, we've had less of that this year. But you've got the new building coming on stream, the PAR, which I think will be a phenomenal venue to host this conference. And hopefully next year we'll be in person and have the opportunity to discuss hopefully a clearer forward environment post-COVID. Some sort of order has been re-established in Eastern Europe, and hopefully China has not taken any lessons from the Putin adventures. So we'll see how we go.
Yeah, we're living in interesting times, which is not always a blessing, as the saying says. Anyway, thanks a lot for your help and your work over the last 2 days, and we'll look forward to another forum in the next few months, and we know that there'll be eventful ones. So thank you.
Cheers, mate.